The fountain of youth, the holy grail that cures all ills, elixirs of immortality, and many other sacred objects with ancient divine powers. Both religious history and Semitic peoples have been telling us for thousands of years about such places, objects, and more specifically, foods with superior powers. One of these mysterious foods is manna, the miraculous food sent by God that enabled the Israelites to survive the harsh conditions of the desert. So what was this substance that fed an entire nation for 40 years? Was it a misunderstood trick of nature, or truly a miracle not of this world? And more importantly, do those who possess this mysterious substance today, believed to spiritually enlighten you and grant you superior abilities, still exist? Let's examine what lies behind this veil of secrecy together. Welcome to Find the Truth. The mysterious food called manna first appears in the Torah, which recounts the Israelites' 40-year journey from Egypt to the Promised Land. According to the book of Exodus in the Torah, when the dew that covered the desert ground in the morning dried up, a thin, flaky substance remained. When the people saw it, they asked each other, "Man who?" Meaning, what is this? And so its name became manna, or man in Hebrew. In the Torah, manna is also described as a small, round thing, like frost on the ground. The people would gather it, grind it in a mill, cook it into flatbreads, and said its taste was like wafers made with fresh oil. In another verse, it is stated to be white like coriander seed and taste like honey. Even in the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah, where information about the Israelites is intensely given, this mysterious food is mentioned, and we see that Allah helped the Israelites with two foods called man and salwa as a favor. However, the verse later states that despite Allah's help, the Israelites rebelled again and became oppressors. In the Quran, especially in Al-Baqarah, we frequently see this lament. Allah constantly helps the Israelites and sends miracles, but the Israelites always turn their backs on Him. In the Quran, Allah states that even though He made a covenant with them, the Israelites broke it, and He tells us about the punishments He gave them. So why would an all-creating and all-powerful being make a covenant with this nation, as mentioned in Al-Ma'idah 70? Why does He constantly help them despite all their disobedience, and then things go wrong in subsequent events? Anyway, let's not get into those topics. As I always say, it's healthier for you to read the books yourselves and see. Maybe I misunderstood, so I don't want to mislead you. Read and see for yourselves. Personally, I can't quite grasp with my mortal mind how the power that somehow created the vast universe would be so preoccupied with the troubles of the Israelites day and night. Frankly, while researching for this video, I thought that the extraordinary information circulating about manna would appear with all sorts of support, and things would go to much more fantastic places. But the truth turned out to be the opposite. Manna has almost no fantastic or magical side to it. In fact, quite the contrary, both the books and various interpretations or studies on these verses clearly reveal its description. Moreover, with the narration in the Bible, at least within the Abrahamic religions, the entire secret of manna is suddenly resolved. When we consider the descriptions of manna in the Torah, Bible, and Quran, and blend them with regional characteristics, what emerges is not a food brought down by angels from the heavens and given to the Israelites. On the contrary, it appears to be a natural formation. The exact date of the enslaved Israelites' exodus from Egypt is unknown. I'll even raise the stakes and say it's not even known if those who left were Israelites, because the period in which this story takes place actually coincides with the great migrations from Egypt to the Levant region of Palestine during the Bronze Age collapse, which occurred with the Santorini eruption. And as you know, egoistic Jews like to write history to their own advantage. And if one day this academic pressure ends and the real story turns out to be the exact opposite of what's told, and all this balloon bursts, I personally wouldn't be surprised. Anyway, let's not get sidetracked. The generally accepted approaches regarding the date of the Israelites' exodus from Egypt suggest the event occurred between 1500 and 1200 BCE, but a definite date is not clear. Now, since our guide is the so-called holy books, let's go step by step with their verses. According to the story, the journey of the group led by Prophet Moses from Egypt to the Promised Land took 40 years. However, if we approach this normally, it's not possible. Because if you were to go there today and walk to those lands, it would take about 7 days. Let's say you exaggerated the breaks and extended the route, say 20 days. After all, 40 years versus 20 days is a huge difference. For this reason, it would be more logical to interpret this 40-year period symbolically. Indeed, the verses actually support this as follows. When we examine the 3 books, we don't see any information about the Israelites initially experiencing famine and thirst. This is because, according to information from recent archaeological excavations, their route started from the fertile Nile Delta. Here, their resources were fresher. Later, the route continued from the western tip of the Sinai Peninsula, extending towards the Sinai and Negev deserts. And this is where the days spent in the desert mentioned in all 3 books appear. During these periods, we see that the Israelites suffered from hunger and thirst as their provisions dwindled. And it is at this very moment that Allah is said to have given them manna. So what is manna? The verses describe a white substance found on plants with the dawn dew in the desert. In other words, angels don't come and say, "Here, take manna." When we approach this scientifically, the secret is solved. The Sinai and Negev deserts, where the event took place almost 3,500 years ago, were not as harsh as they are today. In fact, there were occasionally favorable areas formed by streams and lakes. And these regions coincide with the Israelites' route. In that geography, in such places, certain plants and creatures are frequently found. Those that concern us are the tamari plant family, thought to be abundant in the region, and the Trabutina manipura species of aphids that like to live on it, as well as a rich quail population. Recall the characteristics of manna reported in the Torah: a white substance that appeared with the morning dew, in some accounts pea-sized seeds, and a substance that could be ground into flour. Don't forget the description in another verse about its honey-like taste. Now the chain will connect. The tamarisk plant family includes white-flowered plants that match the description in that region, and indeed, the white parts of this plant can be collected and made into flour. Another important detail is that aphid insects, which like to live on desert plants and drink their sap, secrete a resin-like liquid. Its most important characteristic is that it tastes like honey and can be collected. The picture is clear now, isn't it? A white plant in the desert that can be collected, ground into flour, a honey-like resin found on that plant, and a community in exile combining and eating these two in times of scarcity. It doesn't end there. The Torah states that this manna should not be gathered by hoarding, and that greed should not be practiced. And the Israelites, again, do not listen to this. The reason for this is that this resin and plant spoil quickly in desert conditions after being collected. After all, if it were a sacred food from heaven, it probably wouldn't spoil within 24 hours, would it? When we look at the Quran, we see this food written as kudrat helvas, power halva. This is also a natural food found in that geography, thought to be a lichen group or the sweet secretions of the gezo oak tree. Evliya Salebi even mentions this power halva made from oak tree secretions in his Sayyihatnam, Book of Travels. Furthermore, the Quran specifically mentions the arrival of quails, which is also geographically accurate information. This is because that region of the desert is on the migration routes of quail birds during autumn and spring. Thus, the sudden abundance of birds for the Israelites can be explained scientifically in this way. The story continues with the Israelites growing tired of eating this food constantly and demanding a diet enriched with vegetables and fruits as before. Upon this, both books state that Allah once again becomes angry with them and punishes them. So you can approach this manna story in 3 ways. The first is the absolutely believing and unquestioning approach. You read about this event in the Quran, Torah, and Bible, and you say, Allah miraculously sent food from heaven to these people in the desert, and you move on. You don't think about the details behind it. The second approach is to say, these are old tales, fabrications, people made up stories out of nothing, and you move on. And the last approach, which is the path I constantly recommend you follow, is to ask what kind of truth, scientific, and logical explanation could be behind this story. And by examining this chain of events like our previous analysis, and by researching the narratives in the books of these religions, you learn many different pieces of information. In fact, if you go deeper, you would even see the possibility that the Great Migration itself might not even be related to the Israelites. And if this claim is ever proven, its consequences would pose very serious problems for the books of religions. As I always advise you, read these books with this approach if you are interested in history. Read them remembering that in difficult circumstances, people exaggerated extraordinary things with divine stories and incorporated them into this body of work. It is then that you will encounter not a fantastic story of a dust brought down by angels from the heavens, but a human story explaining how a people in hardship utilized a plant found in nature and the secretion of an insect to survive. And you will understand the simple truth of the matter. The Manna incident is, of course, not a completely solved mystery. As I said, Jews like to add sanctity, divinity, and fantastic stories to every step they take in the religious history they have created. But if we approach this topic scientifically and logically, the results I just explained to you also emerge. Of course, you should do your own research and make your own decisions. After all, these are not definitively proven facts. So if what we call manna is actually just this, then what about the approach of the ancient manna elixir that grants extraordinary spiritual abilities, opens your third eye, and makes you instantly fly? In reality, the basis of this matter is once again extremely simple and, as always, human. While researching this video, I thought that I would encounter extraordinary information in the books and writings of the Abrahamic religions. But there isn't a single line of information about that manna elixir with extraordinary powers in these books, or almost in this entire body of work. Manna only has the description I just gave. So where did this mysterious elixir, monatomic gold powder, magical intermediate substance narrative come from? The answer takes us back once again to the 1970s and 80s, when people were flying, but not spiritually. That is, to the times when New Age movements spread uncontrollably. In the early 80s, David Hudson, a farmer in Arizona, USA, claimed to have discovered a strange substance on his land that could not be identified by traditional chemical methods. While trying to plant crops and make his field more fertile, Hudson was experimenting with applying acidic solutions to his high-sodium soil to increase its yield. It was during these self-conducted experiments that he noticed an unexpected white powder forming in certain steps. When he sent this powder for analysis at Cornell University, the substance in the soil could not be detected by the machine using standard atomic absorption analysis. This was an unusual situation. Upon this, Hudson sent the samples to a more powerful, advanced, and Soviet-designed high-energy spectroscopy device, and things got even stranger. During the analysis, the machine burned all known elements, but a substance constantly remained. And when he tried to burn that substance, it suddenly flared up and disappeared without being analyzed. In fact, the burning chamber of the device even melted due to the effect of the flare. Hudson then argued that this white powder, which he separated by burning all other substances, was a monatomic substance. And he reached an interesting conclusion by equating this event with esoteric texts in the white powder called manna in the Torah, which carried extraordinary qualities like the philosopher's stone and mifkets, the life and enlightenment powder of ancient Egypt. Of course, at that time, New Age groups immediately started marketing this substance as the mysterious monatomic gold powder, the manna elixir from the Torah that kept people alive in the desert for 40 years. And things got out of hand. However, scientifically, it is almost impossible to create stable monatomic gold. This is because gold immediately clumps together to form larger particles. New Age groups claim that if this powder was introduced into the human body, it would melt the calcium buildup in the pineal gland of the brain, opening your third eye, repairing your DNA, strengthening your energy and aura, and due to its superconductive structure, it would regulate the brain's neural networks and give you telekinetic and telepathic abilities. In fact, countless books were written about these claims. However, reality is much darker. Even if you hypothetically managed to obtain monatomic gold, if you introduced it into your body instead of gaining superpowers, you would likely end up in the hospital. According to current nanotoxicology research, gold nanoparticles rapidly accumulate in the liver and spleen, and then reach and accumulate in the kidneys and brain. This results in oxidative stress at the cellular level and leads to DNA damage. Since the studies are very new, the long-term effects have not yet been fully determined, but the results and predictions are not very promising for now. Indeed, Hudson's claimed results have never been replicated in an experiment observed by supervisors. According to university reports, the results of the experiments were inconsistent every time. Today it is thought that this white powder is not a magical monatomic gold powder, but rather silicates or calcium sulfate that cannot be dissolved even with strong acids. But since the arrow was already released, New Age groups in Hudson immediately turned this opportunity into money. From dozens of paid seminars nationwide to supplement, pills known as ormus, and dozens of books written, they sold Himalayan salt enriched with dissolved magnesium, potassium, and calcium minerals as sacred manna to people. This is what misinformation and unsupported populism are like. With a good story, you can even sell Allah's salt water as a sacred food to a crowd prone to unquestioning belief. And people often don't even bother to question what lies behind it, because indulging in sweet dreams is always more attractive than facing bitter realities. So, this is the story of Manna, which appears in religious history and was named man because the Jews said, "What is this?" Starting from a plant in the Negev and Sinai deserts and the sweet secretion of an insect being ground into flour and consumed as bread, it transformed first into a miraculous food brought down from heaven by angels, and then, with American New Age movements, into a mysterious monatomic gold elixir that would instantly elevate you to the level of a perfect human being spiritually. The motif I've always tried to draw your attention to in dozens of videos appears once again. And essentially, a very basic human story is exaggerated with divine touches. Afterwards, thanks to people who want to make money from it, it is sold worldwide. And millions of people either listen to this story without questioning it, or worse, try to become a part of it, drinking salt water and thinking their third eye will open. I will, as always, add some of the sources I used during my research to the description. You can also use them for your own research if you wish. I also want to state this. As the narrator here, I am telling you these events in a fluent way. But remember, these are still topics being researched and questioned. Please remember that I cover extreme history and extreme theories on the channel. And no matter how much I remind you in my videos, I'll say it again now. Please do your own research as well. After all, don't just make a judgment based on my videos or others' videos. Although the origin of manna is relatively simple, the topic of these sacred foods does not end with manna. Indeed, there is a concept of forbidden foods of the gods, shared by thousands of years of civilization, history, and mythology. And these are very interesting topics. If you wish, we can delve into those in next week's videos. To not miss all these upcoming videos, you can accompany me on this journey by subscribing to the channel, turning on notifications, and liking the videos if you enjoyed them. See you in the next video with new secrets. Take care.